Welcome to Friendship Simulator, a podcast which we've recently learned shares a name with a more popular podcast and will be undergoing nomenclature renovations. This week we discuss Tamsyn Muir's Gideon the Ninth, Morbidity, Unlikely Friendships, and Subverting Fantasy Writing. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Leyla.
And Leyla, let's talk about Gideon the Ninth. It's a book that came out in September of last year. It follows the story of Gideon and Harrow in a fantasy universe where basically you're either a necromancer or you work for a necromancer, and everyone is sort of like a part of a weird religion that worships this like space emperor guy. And do you want to just give a quick summary of what you thought?
Yeah, sure. So Gideon the Ninth, as you said, takes place in a fantasy universe where people worship like a necro-Jesus, and there's 9 houses. And as you would guesstimate from the title, Gideon the Ninth is a serf from the 9th house, which are kind of considered to be outcasts, bone cultists, which is kind of neat. They paint their faces as skeletons. They're very dedicated to their fun bone magic, and they carry teeth in their pockets, and it's all very morbid and fun. But the book takes off when Gideon, who, as I said, is a surfer, an indentured servant, she tries to run away from the 9th house. And the lady of the 9th house, Harrow, basically tricks her into staying and then becoming what is called her cavalier, or her kind of personal bodyguard, on a mission to become a necro half-god in a haunted gothic space castle. Does that about do it?
Yeah, I mean, that sums it up. That's perfect. So, the reason I wanted to recommend this book, there's a couple reasons. Firstly, as somebody who is trying to flex their writing muscles, I've been sort of dipping into the writing community, which exists primarily on Twitter, which is really weird. But everybody was talking about how Gideon the Ninth was like a phenomenal book back in September, and when I went and checked it out, I was pleasantly surprised. It was, I mean, sometimes you don't judge a book by its cover, but whenever you see, like, the cover is basically just like this cool skull-faced lady, like, surrounded by bones flying everywhere, and I was like, I can get into that. And I thought that you would be interested in this book because of the way that specifically Gideon is portrayed. I think that the way that they do Gideon's writing and characterization is really good and funny. Gideon is a pleasure to like follow around. I also thought that Tamsyn Muir has a very like kind of beautiful writing style. She has these metaphors, and the ways that she describes things are so pretty, and I wouldn't really be able to figure out how to describe them myself. Like, it is the way that she writes kind of flows and like jars you in a way that I haven't really seen in a lot of other books. So I thought that was particularly interesting. And it's also a little bit different than a normal fantasy story. It's not, I mean, there is like an emperor, and you know, everybody's trying to find, like, in this book, basically it's like a scavenger hunt for necromantic theorems, basically like lab experiments. And I didn't follow a whole lot about that, but basically it's different because it's like a different vibe. There's more like necromancy and dark shadow, like weird edgy, you know, goth people everywhere, instead of just like swords and sorcery, which is a little bit different from traditional fantasy, which I liked. And yeah, I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
I did. You're correct. I did get a kick out of it. I think it's funny you bring up writing Twitter, because I have one toe in like writing Twitter and another toe in animation Twitter, and then like I'm stretching over here to put a finger in comics Twitter too. But it's funny because when this book came out, there's a bunch of like really good, really prolific concept artists that I follow that love this book and drew the shit out of it. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I did pick it up for that reason before. That's why I owned it before you recommended it to me. And I want you to know, I didn't look at it all that closely when I bought it, because I was just like, oh, this is a book everyone loves, including like authors I really enjoy. I should definitely read it at some point. But I didn't take a look at it all that while. I thought Gideon was a boy for the longest time.
Oops.
Not in how do I put this? Honestly, mostly because my boy dog's name is Gideon, and I'm just used to referring to Gideon as a he. Yeah. My brain is broken. So, but yeah, and then I didn't even read the quote at the bottom of the book, which I think is the funniest thing in the world. It's lesbian necromancers explore a haunted gothic palace in space. Decadent nobles vie to serve the deathless emperors. Skeletons! If I had read that quote, I would have read this book 3
I mean,
years
that's
ago.
really the tone for the book. It's really like all this weird fantasy bullshit, and then also a lot of really funny contemporary prose, sort of just like interjected out of nowhere. Specifically, like the way that Harrowhawk and Gideon talk, like where Harrow is like this dour, grim, like all powerful necromancer who's all like, a pretty traditional trope of like, I mean, who the people who are my shit in any sort of character, which is like a very powerful, competent woman who's like frowning all the time, but actually secretly is really cool. Similar to Satsuki Kiryuin, and then Gideon's just like this like big dummy, like who's really beefy and strong, and just throws all sorts of really funny lines in the middle out of nowhere. I just love the way that Muir disrupts that traditional fantasy narrative with Gideon.
Yeah, there's a lot of like jock goth dichotomy.
Yeah, honestly,
it's truly like that's what it is. There's so many descriptors of. I mean, we might as well get into talk about the characters because there's so many characters. But Gideon and Hera, the main ones, because it's from Gideon. The whole story is told from Gideon's point of view, and I think that's why some of the metaphors and stuff is so. It's good writing and it's also good character work because it brings this like layer of internal competence to Gideon because we only ever see things from her point of view. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And Gideon herself she took me a little while to get used to. And I think this is something, part of the reason is because Gideon and Harrow are 18 and 17 respectively. And you and I are in our mid-20s. So there was a lot of like me sitting there and thinking about an 18-year-old trying to like bribe somebody with a porn magazine. Something felt weird to me. And I'm like, oh, I'm just like, teens have these experiences. I'm just like old and protective. Like I was sitting there, I'm like, she's a baby, you can't do this. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this is a novel for teens. They have these experiences. This is not for me to think about. So but I love Gideon. I think she's very funny. She took me a little while to get used to because I think sometimes Tamsyn Muir falls into this trap of like, and I mean this might be just Gideon as a character, but she falls into this trap of like performative profanity, and it just got like sometimes like a curse word, and I mean I swear all the time, so swearing doesn't bother me, but sometimes we'd like interrupt the flow of a sentence, or she would just like throw in a bitch where there didn't need to be one, and I'm like, we could have cut this by 25% and we still would have gotten the point across. But yeah, I love Gideon, and as you said, Harrow also kind of an icon because she just is kind of mean. But that was the interesting thing about her is that she was mean, but also like a mean traditionalist. So there was this weird balance that I think she did really well of like, this is a teenager who has 10,000 years of tradition riding on her shoulder. She's both like very, oh my god, not dictionary, what is the word I'm looking for? Ironically, thesaurus. She's very thesaurus-y, but in like a fun way. She's thesaurus-y, but then she still talks and thinks like a teenager. So I thought that was a really nice balance.
That's a good point. Thesaurus is actually the exact way I would describe Hera because she uses like these huge, big words in contrast to Gideon, who sort of says the same shit over and over again. I love their dichotomy. So yeah, I mean, as far as characters, I would say that so Gideon and Hera are my favorites because we spend the most time with them and we sort of see their relationship go from this antagonistic like childhood enemies to like basically lovers at the end. And I'm a sucker for any sort of story that ends in like radical friendship slash love. And I just really like the way that Muir sort of portrayed the way that they are like at each other's throats, but slowly sort of start like coming together. That said though, like, there's so many characters, like you said, in this that I think they sort of like get lost. I think that there were a couple other ones that I liked, particularly Palamedes, Sextus, and Camilla from the Sixth House. I thought they were really cool. I really loved Camilla's fight with the Second House Cavalier, where they like try to jump them, like they're trying to like get a one up on the Sixth House, and then Camilla just completely takes her apart. That part ruled. And I mean, I like Palamedes because he's sort of like a quiet, competent, like medical sort of necromancer, and he's also like really into Dulcinea Septimus, and the way that Gideon described it was like, oh, well, he's a medical guy, and Dulcinea Septimus has like a medical condition, so maybe that's like a turn on for him the same way that a pair of tight shorts would be. And I thought that was like really funny and weird. That I pretty sure it ends bad for those two at the end. Yeah, it does. Okay. But I liked them for the time that they were with us. I also liked the teens, Jen Marie and Isaac, I think were their names. I really liked them because, you know, they're you sort of, I mean, they don't really get as much time as they probably could have if Muir wanted to flesh them out a little bit more. But I do just love the idea of like some teens, like they're the youngest out of these like 16, actually more than 16, but that doesn't matter. Like necromancers in this big haunted house, and they're sort of like, they're still very much like teens. They're always talking about how like Magnus, who's the fifth house necromancer, is like embarrassing them, and he's like their uncle or something, and they're always just commenting about how Magnus is a big old dork. and there's one part where I think Jean Marie, I think is the girl teen. She asks Gideon like how big her biceps are. There's really cute little character moments, and I think it really hits home when the teens do eventually get just torn apart by big bone monsters. I was really sad when that happened.
Yeah, I was, you know, it's funny so I mean, obviously in terms of this podcast, spoiler, we're gonna spoil the whole mystery, guys.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
There's not gonna be any mystery left for you guys after this. But yeah, so the scene basically is, just for people who haven't read the book for context, Gideon goes down to this sub-basement facility where most of the experiments take place, which is where her and Harrow were kind of doing all these necromantic experiments and trying to get more keys to more doors, which is supposed to, at the end, reveal the secret to Lichterhood or Lichterhood. And that is Harrow's goal, because she... TLDR has been puppeting her parents around like mummies for like 5 years now, because she was too young to take over her house. It was a whole thing. So when they're down in this basement, they have to go down to find Dulcinea Septimus's cavalier, because he has gone missing. And so it ends up that Gideon takes these two children to go down there by themselves, and they find this giant, what is referred to a bone construct, which is this giant bone monster. Isaac dies on the scene, and then Gideon manages to get Jean Marie or Jeannie or Jean Marie. There's such wild names in this one. I love them a lot, but my mouth does not know how to say them. So she takes her upstairs to this lab that she has a key to and locks the door. And both of them, in kind of a false sense of security, are taking a little nap. Gideon literally shuts her eyes for 15 minutes, and then when she wakes up, the little 14-year-old girl is pierced through with bone, and there's a message on the wall that says "Sweet Dreams," which is horribly morbid. But yeah, I really liked the teens. I thought they were really cool. I was shocked that they both died. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, at least one of the babies has to survive, right? And then it's like, no, none of the babies are going to survive. And you're like, oh, shit, okay. People die. Like, there's one death in the very beginning, which is Magnus. And that, I think, is a really, I hate to say this, cool death, because it sets off character moments for these other people we don't really spend a lot of time with. So when Jean Marie finds the ashes in the incinerator, she calls over Gideon and the Corona, ironically, from the third house, which, what a wild name to be reading right now.
Yeah,
Corona
not
Beth.
great.
So she calls over Gideon Corona from the other house, and she gives her reason as Magnus liked the two of you. So that builds this network of character relationships that we just don't have time for, considering we are only spending time through Gideon's eyes, which I thought was really good. But yeah, I really liked them. I really liked, like you said, Septimus. Septimus is a little bitch, which is why I like him so much. I like a man that's like a...
I don't know why you like the worst people.
He's you also, he's great. He's just a little bitchy, and I like that in a man. I like him when they're a little whiny. So he was great. Camilla is an angel. I had a big gay crush on Camilla the entire time. I'm trying to think of all the other houses. Dulcinea was I mean, she wasn't really there, but what we saw of her was cool. Oh my god, who was? I'm trying to think. I mean,
there's the eighth house, which is like the uncle and the battery.
I kept getting them confused with. No, I wasn't getting them confused. I kept forgetting about them and the second house.
Second house is like the military, like, oh, we want to call the cops because everybody's dying.
Yeah, the narcs.
Yeah, the fucking narcs.
The narc house.
And then eighth house hates ninth house, and there's like the uncle and his nephew, and the nephew keeps like drawing energy from his uncle, and it's like an abusive relationship sort of deal. Yeah, that was weird and gross.
A lot of them were weird and gross. The twins from the third house are weird and gross too, because like, you know, there was something weird about like how hot Corona was, and then all of a sudden like Ianthe was just this like skeletal asshole, and
she was just like rude.
She was rude. I didn't like her at all. She was rude, and then she was a murderer.
Yeah, what happened again at the end? I know Ianthe does something, like she also becomes a lictor, right?
Yeah, she sacrifices Babs, but Babs didn't, or their Cavalier, whose full name escapes me, but they call him Babs. He does not want to be a lictor, and he doesn't want to be absorbed, because that's how you become a lictor.
Yeah, you absorb eat your Cavalier, yeah.
Which, what a thing to find out that late. And like, how much, like, were you able to piece together any of the puzzle pieces before Gideon was, when you were reading?
Oh no, I'm reading it. I just read it for the second time, and I'm still unable to piece all this shit together. Like, that's one thing that I would criticize this book for, is that a lot of the mystery escapes me. Maybe I'm just a dullard, but like, there's a lot of bits, like, even though I know, like, when I was reading that bit about Janine's death, like, I don't know how the magical bones construct killed her in the locked room. Like, I don't know why. I mean, we know that, like, what is her name? The first lictor who impersonated Dulcinea is like behind it all, and she's the one who's been like knocking people off. But like, I don't really know why or how, besides like she just wants the Emperor to come here. And you have in our notes that like this book feels like a D&D session, and I think that is exactly why. It starts with like a typical D&D session. It's like, okay, here's these 8 things you have to do, but then like the plot sort of like spirals around those things, and they're only tangentially related, but like a lot of it I feel like was not necessarily set up earlier. Like there's a lot of just weird stuff that I feel like I either missed or wasn't explained properly, and maybe that's just because my brain has been melted by anime and people just like tell you their motivations and plans like straight up.
That's very fair. I was able to guess most of it, but not how it was going to unravel. So, like, when they figured out how lictorhood worked, I was just like, okay, their hero is going to somehow unwillingly become a lictor. And I think the thing that tipped me off to there being, I thought it was going to be a pissed off ghost of a cavalier, because when Isaac died, I think the blood writing on the wall was "You lied to us."
I think it was Death to the Fourth House, right?
Oh no, that one. Yeah, so right before that, there was a "You lied to us" at some point, though.
I don't remember when that was though. But I mean, I do agree that like it would make sense for like it be the revenant of an angry cavalier, because of like, just like how you said, like Babs got eaten by Ianthe, like it would make sense for them to be like a vengeful cavalier who didn't want to be, you know, part of this lictorhood narrative.
Yeah, but in the end it ended up being Cytherea.
Yeah, Cytherea, I think.
Cytherea, yeah, it sounds like the better pronunciation of that one. And I thought she was neat. The thing I was confused about is her explanation of how she kind of got into Dulcinea's body was weird, because I was like, okay, well, how much of the person that we met was Cytherea and how much of it was Dulcinea? I think it was mostly Cytherea, but like they still really cared about Dulcinea, so it was strange. It was like I'm not sure if it was Gideon unable to detach the image of who she thought Dulcinea was from the fact that it was Cytherea all along, or if it was just like weirdly written. But that was my only like confusion about some of the stuff. But I think that's a pretty good transition into what we're talking about in terms of tone. We talk a lot about subverting fantasy tropes, I think, because you and I both read a lot of fantasy, and the show so far has been pretty rooted in fictional stuff.
It's all fictional
it's
stuff
all
so
fiction.
far.
And we're going to probably keep it that way. But
yeah.
Who needs nonfiction right now? But I really, considering you and I both dabble in writing, how do you feel about setting the way Muir set up the fantasy world? Did she have a clear enough explanation of the magic? Was it necessary to have a clear explanation of the magic? Or was it good that we were kind of going through it through the herbo eyes of Gideon, who was just kind of two biceps taped together?
Yeah, I mean, I did like the way that, like, Muir does explain, like, the magic system. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory. Like, at the beginning, they have Harrow shoot skeletons out of the ground to kick Gideon's ass, and then, you know, there's like one point in the book where she's like, all right, this is Thanergy. This is the magic here, and it comes from dead things or things being really close to being dead, or like babies dying or whatever. And you know, I think that's enough for me. Like, if you have read any sort of fantasy, you sort of get the concept of necromancy. Like, okay, yeah, you can do weird shit with bones and stuff. And then I think that she delved into it a little bit deeper when discussing the house's specialties. Like, whenever they were trying to bring Magnus and Abigail back to life, like, they talked about how each of the houses had their own different weird ways of trying to resurrect them. So I kind of like the way that she did it. There's a whole other part of this narrative where, like, the Emperor is fighting with, like, his big armies out in the reaches of space, and there's, like, apparently, like, politics or something that I did not really either pick up on or care about. That you know, I thought it was fine. I mean, it hinted at you know, there being a bigger world out there, and it sets up Harrow the Ninth. But, you know, she didn't do it too much, but, like, I didn't really follow the other stuff besides that.
Yeah, I think that going through this book from the eyes of Gideon was probably the best introduction to this, like, weird space necromancy world, because Gideon's, I mean, she's not dumb, but she, like, doesn't care about a lot of stuff. She doesn't care about necromancy. She's not a necromancer. She's like, I don't give a fuck about any of this shit. But it's cool because Gideon cares about people, and that is a good introduction to caring about the myriad of characters in this book. Like we said, there's 9 houses at play. Each has a necromancer and a cavalier, and then we know a little bit more about the 9th house, and then there's also Teacher, and then Cytherea comes in at the end, and then also Necro Jesus. So there's a lot of characters to get into in 450 pages, which sounds like a lot, but isn't really, when you consider how big this plot is overall. So I thought it was actually a really good idea on her part to just give us a dumbass to go through this with first, because now we have the first layer that's Gideon's point of view, and we're like, okay, these are the people we cared about. This is what happened. We got to lay out. We care about Harrow a lot. We got to see Harrow, who was objectively kind of a douchebag, through Gideon's eyes, who, despite, like, a childhood of, I'm going to just go ahead and call it abuse, kind of came back around on Harrow, and like you said, they ended in, like, a friendship pseudo almost romance, poised for a romance, I would say. At the end of the book, Gideon literally sacrifices her life for Harrow. It's a lot. And then the first thing Harrow does when she meets Necro Jesus is like, give me back this dumb shit that I love. But I think that was a good idea, and it really sets you up for Harrow's sequel, which is going to be great because Harrow has an insight on all the politics, on the magic, so we can get, like, a second layer of this world. And then I'm incredibly curious about what the third book's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say where they go from here. I'm sure there's going to be some wild shit going on, but I'm definitely excited to see, like, what Harrow does, because now it's, like, ultra competent, stern woman on a mission to like get revenge, and that's good shit.
That's incredibly good shit. And like she's also, I think the cool thing is her and Gideon are both incredibly single-minded. Where like Gideon's single mind becomes protect all the people, and Harrow's is just like be extremely good at what I do, which she is. Oh, we're talking about the writing. I thought it was cool that there's a lot of like repetition happening that comes in threes, and I thought Harrow's little bad bitch refrain of like, I have surpassed my father and my mother and all the necromancers of the ninth house, or whatever the fuck she says, is so dope. Like, I wish I had the confidence to stand there and just, like, as I'm painting, be like, man, I have surpassed my father and my mother. She's so dope. But I'm really excited to kind of get in her head. I don't know if you read the synopsis for the second book, but, like, her health starts failing, and I'm generally very curious to see how all that's going to play out. I want Gideon back very badly, and if anyone's going to bring her back, I think it's going to be that crazy demigod.
Yeah, it'll be really cool to see what happens in the next book. So you wrote, your question was, how do we feel about reading this as adults in our mid-20s? Do you want to go deeper into that?
Yeah, we kind of brought it up earlier. These are teens. Most of them are teens. As for me, 26 is a funky age. I don't know how you feel about being in your mid-20s, but I'm starting to feel weird about certain things. Like, I noticed it when I started watching Naruto way back when, like 3 years ago, with my roommate. I mean, the protagonists are like 11, and I was like, these are my children, and you're sending them to fight. Like, this like weird, I'm gonna go ahead and call it maternal instinct and hope my mother never hears this. But this like weird maternal instinct pops out of me, and like now, like I said earlier, reading this book about 18-year-olds and who they find hot, and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to hear about this at all. This is weird.
You're not allowed to be horny. Not until you're 28.
Not until you're old and understand the implications of politics and sex and power dynamics. But like, it was just it was borderline. I'm gonna go talking about Gideon's biceps, I think, was funny, and then the third time it happened became uncomfortable for me. But again, I am not the target audience for this novel, so like, I get it. But it did take me a minute to remember that I'm not the target audience for this novel. Did you have any particular feelings about it when you were reading it?
I mean, not really. I mean, as far as like you were talking about how Harrow is such a bad bitch, I think that makes sense for being a teen, because like, I mean, I still feel like I was the smartest I ever was at 17, and then it's just been sort of like a rock tumbling down a hill ever since then. But you know, I feel like Muir makes it fairly realistic, because like when you are like 17, 18, like on the cusp of adulthood, you feel like an adult, and you feel like, you know, you have mastery over all those, you know, all the emotions and you know, big feelings that happen in your life. And even though you're not necessarily experienced, like you know enough that you know what they are and you can identify them. And I thought that was realistic to the experience of being like an older teen. As far as like, you know, the way that they're portrayed in comparison to the adults, I think that's probably accurate as far as like general fantasy media. Like, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, you know, has to do with children going through trauma, and I mean, most animes are about child soldiers. Like, you know, very few of them unpack that, except for like Gundam and shit. But like, I mean, I didn't hate the way that Muir engaged with the teen aspect of it. I thought it was fine.
No, I didn't hate it at all. But it just like, it was objectively good, but for me it was like, I had to get into the headspace of it for a little while. For some reason, it's easier for me to relate to like 13-year-olds than 18-year-olds. I don't know what that says about me. I think I'm just so, for me personally, I'm so over that feeling of like knowing everything, because that got me into a lot of trouble in the past. where I felt like I knew everything. Now I'm so just like, man, I'm just dumb and I'm just trying to make it. I relate much more to like 13-year-olds and their overblown problems, and I'm like, I feel you, baby. It all feels very big and important all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I think thinking about the stuff we've watched before, because we mostly have been watching, I think Stargazing was our first kind of dip into a bookland. Mm-hmm. But it's fun to also, if we want to consider the difference between getting into the head of, it all comes back to Boruto, getting in the head of someone like Boruto on screen, where we are kind of this omniscient third person, and it's the artist's job to use visuals to convey as much emotion as they humanly can. And then something like a book where we are in Gideon's head for like 450 pages. We get her. Do you feel like there's, I guess, a difference in how... Do you find any medium like particularly relatable? Is it easier for you to get in the headspace in terms of like watching something or reading something or a comic? Or is there something where you feel like you connect to a character more in a certain dimension?
I would prefer... Like, I don't actually watch that many, like, movies or cartoons besides anime, but I do feel like a visual medium is easier to relate just because you can sort of visually see the way that characters behave and their stylistic choices, and if necessary, the writers can make them either think, we can either hear their thoughts or have them speak their thoughts out loud and their motivations and stuff. It's much more difficult to convey that in books. I'm especially when I'm in my own writing, I'm trying to make my characters' choices and motivations consistent with like the character they've been through the first half of the book.
Well, you're doing a better job than Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Oh God! Do we just want to turn the rest of this podcast into dunking on Love Never Dies?
How about we give it 5 minutes at the end?
Okay, that sounds good. Anyway, yeah, I think that's a very difficult thing to do in writing is because a lot of the times you can't just have your character when you're writing a book or a novel. You can't just have your character say like, oh, this is my motivation for this thing. Like, it has to be a little bit more subtle than that. And like with this book, I feel like I missed a lot of things because Muir didn't go ahead and flat out say whose motivations were what were happening, like until like 2/3 of the way through the book. So I felt like I was stumbling a little bit, and that's why, I mean, the thing about writing is that it's the only medium that I've been like even remotely trained to be creative in. I have no other talents besides that, unfortunately, which is why that's the one that I use. But I do feel like it's a lot easier to get across a motif or a feeling by using images as opposed to words.
So that's curious, and got me thinking. Do you feel like then the sort of vagueness of the motivations in this book in particular, and a lot of like YA fantasy writing, I would still call this, there's a trend in fantasy writing that I think we should acknowledge, in that people like S.A. Chakraborty, who wrote City of Brass and Kingdom of Copper, will get sidelined into young adult by virtue of being a woman that writes fantasy, but I would not call City of Brass a YA book at all.
Oh, no.
As a full-on...
I mean, they're all adults, right? I mean, Nari is like what? She's like at least over 20.
Yeah. But this is I would call this YA fantasy. It's a little bit gritty, but it's for sure like targeted at teens. Do you think that the vagueness and motivation is kind of purposeful in letting teens kind of project feelings and motivations onto this like very heroic set of characters?
The thing that I've learned from writing Twitter is that hardly anything is necessarily intentional, right? Sometimes you just sort of stumble into something that works and you're like, you know what? I'll take it.
That's very true.
But I do think that a lot of the things that Muir does are intentional, though. I feel like at least the main plot beats she sets up are pretty much like, hey, I have this beef with this girl. Oh, now this girl was nice to me. Now I'm in love with her. Like that sort of stuff makes sense. And then that might also be another problem with the fact that there's just so many goddamn characters that it's hard to keep track of everybody's feelings and aspirations.
Yeah, when I opened the book the first time and there's that like rundown of all the houses and characters, I was so intimidated. I was like, "Oh Jesus Christ, Aaron, what are you making me do?"
Yeah, that one scared me too.
I was like, Jesus. Okay, so here's a fun thought exercise then for us also, as a follow-up to what we just talked about. If you and I, in another life where we're the wealthy Mammadova motion picture studio, would we want to adapt this, A, at all, B, as a live-action motion picture, as a animated motion picture and give it to a studio like Sony or DreamWorks, or as an anime? We're a very versatile motion picture studio.
Yeah, I know. We are extremely wealthy and powerful, and have a lot of animators at our disposal.
And also series or feature.
I feel like this one definitely feels more like a feature. I feel like it'd be more difficult to chop this one up, and I think that the story could be better in like just one like 2-hour movie. It definitely has the structure of a horror movie with people getting knocked off all the time, and there's a lot of weird characters floating around that you kind of get, but you don't necessarily have to get. I feel like I mean, listen, if we're gonna get let's listen, it's 2030. The film industry has been devastated in the wake of the coronavirus of 2020, 2021. And a lot of people are having difficulty getting back on their feet. The re-election of Donald Trump and the subsequent rise of warlord Ocasio-Cortez have really made it difficult for the American consumer. Well, I mean, we say American, we really mean the Confederation of the East Coast states, West Coast states, and the blighted Midwestern breadbasket owned breadbasket / conglomerate owned by Amazon. That listen, the problem is my CEO partner is that we need people to we need something that gets people butts in seats, and we know that from the old days people really liked live action YA movies, and I think if we can get that back into the if we can bring that back, that spirit of nostalgia back to the the North American consumer, we can really have something here, which is why I think we should shoot this as a like a YA horror.
Okay, that's very fair. And you know what's funny? I think is it would appeal, if we're going to talk about like real life metrics, I think it would appeal to the Hunger Games crowd, which hasn't been appealed to in a very long time. If I were to pitch this, my side of this, I would want to do like a really tight, either, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and say live action mini series. Like a 6-episode, either a Netflix or Amazon I would trust it with, like a really tight horror miniseries, because I think there's just these like nice little punctuations where I don't want to leave out any character moments, and there's 450 pages in this beautiful little novel, but at the same time I think you're right in like butts and seats, so it needs to be something bingeable and not overwhelming, but still like a good Halloween rewatch. So I think for me, I would go ahead and do... I'm surprised, at first I was thinking anime. I really did. At first I was like, this would make a good anime. But now that I'm really thinking about it, I think that the Hunger Games crowd would really like this. And I also think that the story is so weird. I want to see flesh people do it. Yeah. I do. I want to see a cranky ginger put on shitty skull face paint and some aviators 4 times in the story. I really do. I want to see a teen sweat and blood. I think that would be cool. So, yeah. I think it's just a neat thought exercise when you're talking about kind of visual versus written word. Because I'm a big, how do I put this? Curmudgeon when it comes to adaptations. I get very cranky about adaptations because I think sometimes they're not necessary. Or sometimes they get weirdly... Things get weirdly misadapted into mediums where they don't necessarily fit or have a good time, and people don't have a good time consuming that medium or adaptation. see a lot of like video game movies. Not good. Sonic the Hedgehog, perfect film.
Okay, that was a good one,
so
though.
Good. But there's a lot of like, up until Detective Pikachu and Sonic the Hedgehog, like there wasn't really a good video game movie. I have watched the Dragon Age and Mass Effect films. They are patently horrible.
Sorry, there was a Dragon Age and Mass Effect.
They're both on Hulu. They have the same exact story. They just swap the gender of the protagonist and the love interest. It's very fun. I watched them both in one sitting. I truly,
It sounds like a bad day.
Artists really try their best. They really did. I'm gonna give it that they tried their best. But anyway, so it's just a fun thought exercise for like me in particular because there's a haste in Hollywood, I think, especially to adapt everything to a movie, but it doesn't always work. And I would, on the other hand, there's a lot of people who maybe reading isn't that accessible to them. So people with ADHD, people with maybe just like not enough money to go pick up a $30 book, or no access to a library. And so bringing stories like this to a wider audience, like a big lesbian fun horror romp that doesn't end in the lesbians dying. Well, willingly dying in this case. Gideon, and is she dead? We don't know. So
listen, she's gonna come back.
She'll be back. It's fine. I believe in Gideon. She's perfect. But it would be fun to bring this to a kind of bigger commercial audience. But how do you do that without like this would not work as a stage play? I think it would work as a comic, but then again, you're going into a niche audience. So it's just, I don't know, it's just fun. I wanted to see what your take was, and I think you're on the. I think you and I will both make a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean that's the main thing.
Yeah, capitalism. We're all kind of like slaves to it or whatever.
Yeah, it's been going really good for us in April of 2020. Really crushing it.
Yeah, we're doing fucking great. Hey, do you do a lot of horror? Let's talk about the morbidity shit. Are you a horror kind of person?
Oh no, Leyla, I'm a big weenie. Let's see. The last horror movie I watched would probably be One Missed Call, which is an adaptation of like a Japanese horror story. And that came out, I believe, in 2006. So I don't watch horror films because they frighten me. But what I will tell you is that the reason that I was also sort of drawn to this is because there is an anime which was called Shaman King, based on a manga. And I was really obsessed with that when I was like 12, 13. And it was all about like ghosts and being friends with the ghost and your magic powers and all that. But there's like one bad guy in Shaman King in the initial run who is a necromancer, and like he was like a really cool character, but he also like disemboweled the main character's like friend while he was alive, and that gave me like a really deep seated like fear of any sort of medical shit for a long time. And I'm already a naturally very like skittish like person. Like I am still technically a nurse, but like I haven't actually done any real hospital shit in a long time. And I still like have fainting spells sometimes. I passed out during a circumcision once, which was a funny story. Yeah, in general I don't do horror and blood and guts very well.
Same. I'm also a Weenie Hut Jr. Though much like you, when I was 12 and 13, I did have at internet. If we ever become famous, please don't cancel me for this. I do really enjoy. I don't know what my mixed cocktail of emotions is towards this thing now. Could be called enjoyment. But I really liked Hellsing when I grew up, which was not something I should have been reading at that age. And I actually stopped reading it and then I watched the OVA, which is the 8-episode miniseries, with my roommate 2 years ago. And I will say this: it is nonsense. There's no story. It's very problematic. Like, very. I cannot recommend it to anybody. But if you read it when you were a child, you're there. You're like, okay, yeah, I remember this bullshit. It's very like have you heard, it's on TLDR, it's like there's a vampire hunting agency and it's run by you would love her, the meanest, at least bisexual in the world. And she has a vampire in her service called Alucard, which is Dracula backwards, as we know, and he's like cool and can turn into a dog sometimes. But yeah, it's wildly problematic. There's like 2 sexual assaults in there that are very vivid, and the whole thing is about like Nazis for some reason at the end. It's insane. But yeah, that was kind of my exposure to horror, and I am such a fucking weenie that if my friends take me to see anything, what was the last thing we saw that was, I kept hiding in my friend's sleeve. There was something we saw, and there was like Birds of fucking Prey. I went to
Wait, hold up. That's like that's a comedy.
Yeah, I wanted to see Birds of Prey, and there's some scenes where the dude slices off some faces, and I was deep in my chair and had my hoodie over my head, and I was like, I can't do it.
Ooh.
So I'm also a weenie. But did having it written make it more palatable to you? Because like, I don't know. I think I would be able to watch this if it was presented like cartoony enough, but and I think that there is a level of, I would call it cartoon violence in this book, because there's no way Gideon should be as strong as she is. There's no way that she could take the level of kind of abuse that she does from Harrow and then still be able to forgive her at the end, and like, if we're talking real life parameters. But I think that made it a lot more palatable to me to like try to picture it in my like brain movie box. Do you have any other like reading exposure to horror, or is this just kind of like an outlier for both of us? Because it's definitely an outlier for me.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like gore and violence goes, reading doesn't bother me, or like you said, with cartoon violence doesn't really bother me. It's the rare occasions that I've seen an exposed like intestine, or had to dig around in someone's veins to get a needle in it, like that's when I start getting the fever sweats, like that one. Yeah, like as long as it's not physically, like I'm not physically in the room, that doesn't bother me. Yeah, but I mean, this is just the way that it was portrayed. It's a little bit mucky and gross. That is still more of an outlier than what I'm normally interested in. Like, I haven't ever read a Stephen King book or anything like that. So.
Oh, my neighbor is reading one right now, and me and her kind of like, when we take our dog walks every night, we give each other kind of a digest of what we've been consuming, and I'm not gonna lie to you, Stephen King, Mr. King does not sound appealing to me. His novels, they sound mostly just kind of gross and like a little problematic. Like, he has been writing for a long time, but still.
He has some bad takes on Twitter too.
Yeah, I've seen a couple. They're not fucking great, tell you that much.
They're not ideal. But when you're that rich, you can say whatever you want.
That's true. There's fucking, have we met J.K. Rowling? That lady. Yeah, so I thought this was a really cool book, and for all the reasons that we have enlisted, it was just kind of like fun and loud, and the back cover here says "A profane Daria in space," which I also think is really accurate. It's so stupid. There's so many just like good, funny, dumb moments in here. Of like Gideon just being a complete herbo that make reading this like horror romp so delightful. Like I said, it took me like a minute to get into it because it's just a lot to take in, because you're like, oh, there's skeletons but also space, and she's an orphan and getting her ass kicked. This is a lot. But yeah, I quite loved this novel. Do you have any final thoughts before we rip on Love Never Dies for a couple of minutes?
I don't really. It's just that, like, I want to reiterate what you said. Like, if you are listening to this and you are interested in picking up Gideon the Ninth, firstly, sorry for spoiling everything. But secondly, the character moments specifically with Gideon and her funny dialogue and her evolving relationship with Harrow are definitely make it worth it, even if you aren't super into weird necromantic bullshit. So yeah, definitely a recommend.
Yeah, I'm quite as we've established, we are both quite queasy people, and we got through this fine. So we're gonna take the last 5 minutes of the show, talk about Andrew Lloyd Webber musical called Love Never Dies, which is a sequel to Phantom of the Opera. I will give a brief Synopsis. The synopsis is as such. It has been 10 years since shit has happened. Miss Giry and Meg Giry from the opera have escaped with the Phantom to Coney Island, where he now has a freak show, and the show posits that the Phantom is writing all of the catchy, fun jingles for the freak show, and for Meg, who is now, mind you, formerly a Parisian ballerina in an opera, is now basically a 1915 or 1905 version of a stripper, and is doing these like cute little dances called Bathing Beauty. And
I forgot about
Bathing Beauty's in there.
Fuck
yeah,
me.
It sucks so bad. And the way the show positions this is that somehow this is supposed to impress the Phantom, who is again writing all of this with his fun, freaky henchmen. And then Christine Daae shows up with her husband Raoul and her 10-year-old son Gustav to sing for Oscar Hammerstein, who I think is a reference to like the actual real playwright Oscar Hammerstein. And the Phantom finds out. He comes. They have a horny song that doesn't end.
It's so fucking long, Leyla. Oh my god, it's so long. I don't remember dick about it except for the fact that it took forever.
I'm gonna look up how long it is. It's so bad.
Fucking Christ.
Okay, Beneath the Moonless Sky is... Come through for me, Spotify.
They're going on and on about how they secretly had sex the one time and it was really good and really bad and like so sexy, but it... God.
Oh my god, somehow it's only a 4.5-minute long song.
It felt like 12.
It's so bad. Anyways, so the Phantom shows up. Mind you, the Phantom's just like cool now. We've forgotten that he's a terrible murderer.
We forgot he's a murderer who preys on young girls, but
Yeah,
sure.
they're fucked. It's fine. So, basically the Phantom is like, if you don't sing for me, I'm gonna kill your son. And Christina's like, oh no! And then she goes and shows up to the freak show where she's gonna sing, apparently, with Raoul, and she meets up with Meg and Miss Giry, and they have like a weird little reunion scene where Meg is like, wait, you were booked to sing? Oh no, but I was booked for my big break. And Raoul is like, it's okay, you were just double booked, it's fine, you can share the space. Which never ends up being a conflict, and it's whatever. I don't care. So, basically then Gustav the son runs off and the Phantom finds him to sing the only bop in the entire show, which is fucking Beauty Underneath, and he figures out that it's his son. And then him and Raoul make a bet on if Christine's gonna sing or not, and the terms are if she sings, she stays, and if she doesn't sing, Raoul gets to go home with all of his gambling debts paid, because he's a gambling alcoholic now. Oh my god, so much happens. So she sings in this like weird peacock dress that I hate, and then her and the Phantom go to her dressing room and make out, and she finds like a note from Raoul with a single red rose, because that was a thing from the last show. And it's like, I've gone. And then she's like, oh no, where's Gustav? And like, Gustav got kidnapped by Meg, who's just unhinged now. So her and the Phantom go to the pier. Meg has Gustav. She's about to drown Gustav. And then she has a gun. And then the Phantom's like trying to talk her off the ledge. And he makes the dumbest mistake possible, which is like, oh, well, you know, I see the beauty underneath, Meg. And like, I can help you. And blah, 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 blah. We can't all be like Christine. And she loses her mind. She accidentally shoots the gun. Christine dies. And as she's dying in the Phantom's arms, Meg and Miss Giry go off to get help. As she's dying in the Phantom's arms, she's like, Gustav, come here. And she's like, this is your father. And he screams and runs off. And Christine dies in the Phantom's arms. And then Gustav brings Raoul back. And Raoul gets to be the hero. And that's my summary of Love Never Dies. Now, Aaron, how did you feel about this Broadway show?
Yeah, I mean, it did run on Broadway, because Andrew Lloyd Webber can just make money out of nowhere. I mean, I saw this in like one of those special theater productions in like 2012, and it's been a big point of contention between me and my fiance, because she will defend the movie, or the musical, and I'm just like, this... What is the point of writing a whole fucking musical if you just were like, hey, I didn't like the ending of my first one. What if I made a whole musical? How about I fucked up, even though it's like one of the most beloved musical. Phantom of the Opera is actually my favorite musical. Like, I can't believe Sir Andrew fucking just went and rewrote the whole goddamn story because he felt like it. And what are you doing?
I can't believe he retconned all of it. And also, okay, so like, what a wild misunderstanding of your own fucking material when you're like, you know who had a lot of sexual tension? The murdering phantom that lives underneath an opera and this young prima donna. There's a lot of horniness happening there, obviously. Not at all an abusive and stalkerish relationship.
I mean, in the original Phantom, it is definitely framed that way, but like Andrew doesn't, realize the power dynamics. He's like, oh yeah, no, Christine's totally cool with it, so it's fine. When in fact, Andrew, it's actually extremely not fine. Could you be cool?
No. I don't know what the rest of that question was. Would you be cool? No. It's just no. The answer is no. Literally, oh my god. So let's talk about Beneath the Moon, the Sky. We started talking about Beneath the Moon, the Sky. We can keep talking about it because it's truly the worst song in the entire show. It sucks so bad. It is so long. It is trying to manufacture a sexual tension that, like you said, the power dynamics there are fucked so hard. And it doesn't end. And my question is this, right? Basically, the song is like, oh, we had like one night of passion and I touched you and I held you and I kissed you and I woke up and like, what, you weren't there. Okay, cool, great. So, are you saying that one, the Phantom's hideout was somehow accessible to anybody but the fucking Phantom? Two, are you saying that they fucked in the hideout, or did they fuck beneath the moon, the sky, outside in Paris somewhere like cats? Three, I still don't get where the Phantom left.
Because they were trying to, after he boned Christine.
Yeah, after the good big fuck.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's because he sucks. It's because he's a shitty person.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so I've got Genius lyrics up right now.
Oh yeah, bring it.
Firstly, it's telling me that this song is 7 minutes and 34 seconds long, so
what?
That...
Oh, because it probably blends into Once Upon Another Time.
Yeah. So I'm just looking through some of the annotations. Theater Nerd 52560, his first note is a 7-minute song about a one-night stand. So, thank you, Theater Nerd 52560.
There is one extremely good annotation, and it's in the line that says, with a need too blatant to deny, nothing mattered then except for you and I, again and then again beneath the moon, the sky. And somebody just put 3 times where you have to salute the Phantom stab.
Listen, Eric ain't no limp dick, alright?
Oh my god. Well, oh my god, this is so... Also, does he fuck with his mask on? This is a very important question.
I can't... It says their feelings were bared. Soul gazed into soul. I looked into your heart and saw you're pure and whole. Cloaked under the night with nothing to suppress, which suggests that they were completely nude. I just wish... Andrew...
That's a terrible song.
Fucking Christ. I can't believe this man.
This
man has done some crimes in theater. Like, I can't believe... He should be prosecuted.
And was it you that brought up that he... Because I talked to literally 5 people about the show yesterday, and all of the reviews were quite like this. Was it you that brought up that he had the melody for Christine's aria, whatever the Love Never Dies, right? I don't know what the fuck it was called. It was a terrible song. It took
it was called Love Never Dies. Yeah, that's the big final song that she sings. But
so
I wasn't
boring.
me that brought this up.
It's so boring. But basically, he pulled a Memories with it where he had the melody already and just recycled it. And I'm like, Mon frere, you can't do that. You can't do that for your big number. That's supposed to be a new one. What are you doing? It's just like the whole thing is so inconsistent with itself and completely incongruent with the other musical, because when you hear refrains from the original Phantom, they stick out so bad from the tone and the musicality of Love Never Dies. It is truly the worst. It's so... Also, I can't even finish a thought. I'm so angry. Can we talk about Miss Jiri's complete heel turn in this thing?
Yeah, I mean, Madame Jiri was, like, pretty cool in the first one, right? She was like, oh, yeah, watch out for the... I mean, like, he does write all the good musicals, but just, like, don't, he is kind of shady. And this one, she's like, yeah, I'll fucking kill this person that you boned once for no reason.
And her son also. Because,
and also her child that I have no interest in.
Because apparently our respectful fear of you translates to like a weird 10-year-long reverence wherein we helped you escape. Even though you didn't help him escape, you helped Christine escape. And now you hate Christine? Very confusion.
Yeah, I mean, this dude did burn down, like, your place of work, but it does make sense that you would be, like, blindingly loyal to him for a decade.
He also, like, murdered people you know.
Yeah, like, several people did die.
He's a stalker and a murderer.
It's just fan fiction, and it's not even particularly good. Like, and you had the audacity to make people pay to go see it. Like, Andrew, just get an AO3 account and just throw some sexy tags on there and don't make this a whole, like, fucking franchise, my man.
It's true, he wrote a really horny fanfiction about his own musical, and you know what's sad? It was coming to Austin this season. It's still touring. It was coming to Austin this season. I was so upset. I still am, clearly. I'm like on the verge of tears. It's such a terrible fucking musical. Who is watching it? Who is propelling it? Who is putting more money into this fucking animal's pocket? Andrew Lloyd Webber is no longer human. He has reached this place after Cats, after Love Never Dies, after Cats the movie. He has reached this place where he has too much money and too much power. He's not a person anymore. He's a construct of terror. To
tie it back to Gideon, it's as if he absorbed the cavalier that was Phantom of the Opera and Cats, and did he write Evita?
I think so.
Yeah, all his good musicals, he sort of ate those up and then became a huge monster with unlimited power and money. And just like, sort of started doing whatever the fuck he wanted.
That's true. I mean, like, even though it's Andrew Lloyd Webber, man, press F to pay respects to musical theater, man. That was a terrible fucking show that we all watched yesterday. I watched it with a couple of friends from college that I don't get to talk to very often. Then my friend, one of my closest friends, Marty, was just like, okay, I guess I'm watching this, immediately after I said it was patently horrible because we both enjoyed tormenting ourselves. And then you messaged me and you were like, can we talk about this when you're done? And I was like, oh, so I knew this was bad because listen, the way I get introduced to most musicals is like, I watch the Tony Awards and then whoever has a good performance, I look up the musical and I just like, listen to the soundtrack, and then if I like it, I seek it out, whether it's going to a touring show or just listening to the soundtrack or finding a pro shot or something. And I listened to, I don't remember how I found out about Love Never Dies. I just know that I listened to the entire soundtrack, and I literally could not hum a single refrain to you. Not a one. The only song I know is Beauty Underneath. It's the only song, and it sounds nothing like the rest of the show.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums it up.
Patently fucking terrible. What a note to end on.
Yeah. Gideon rules, Andrew sucks, and if I was able to choose my own method of execution, I would like to be able to fight Andrew Lloyd Webber to the death. And if I die, as long as I can take him down with me, that would be fine. I want that to be on record.
Okay, yeah, it's on record. And you know what? I would love to be your cavalier for that.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
All right, Leyla, where can people find us, I guess?
So I am still at LEYLSES at Lailsas on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, and I am still writing my fantasy romance webcomic that does not have fucking Beneath the Moonless Sky for 7.5 minutes in it. Is in fact a perfectly palatable, tender gay romance called Astral Heart, and that's astralheartcomic.com.
Yeah, you could just read Astral Heart for 7 minutes and have like a much deeper, more meaningful experience than listening to Beneath the Moonless Sky, so highly recommend that. You can find me on Twitter at AaronSXL, on YouTube at AaronS, where I mostly talk about how healthcare in Indiana is broken, and I also make a podcast called My Brother, My Brother's Friend, and Me, where me and some of my friends who are former evangelicals go through evangelical Christian media and talk about why it's a nightmare. We just finished the Gods Are Not Dead trilogy, which was wild.
Wait, shit! I you need a recommendation.
Oh yeah, hold up. Well, it's fine. This is all being cut and spliced together. I'm having a bad time in like 12 hours, but it's fine right now.
Okay, cool. I would like you to watch seasons 1 and 2 of Gallivant on Netflix. There are 8 episode seasons.
Gallivant.
Yes.
Okay.
There are 8 episode seasons. It is a giant, corny musical romp written by the people who wrote Disney musicals. And there's a bunch of like cameos and references to Broadway shows, and it's just like a typical like prince rescues princess story that goes like off the rails. It's very good.
Okay, I'm excited.
Yeah, and then I don't know what the fuck our sign off should be, but I mean, Mobimbe has like a final. Do we have like a? Do we want to pull a quote from the thing we did?
I mean, I have a quote.
What's your quote?
I'll just read it. I have tried to dismantle you, Gideon Nav. The Ninth House poisoned you. We trod you underfoot. I took you to this killing field as my slave. You refused to die, and you pity me? Strike me down. You've won. I've lived my whole wretched life at your mercy, yours alone, and God knows I deserve to die at your hand. You are my only friend. I am undone without you.
I love that quote very well.
That's my favorite line. That shit's so good.